ever wondered how long it takes to actually get connected to the grid?
I haven't thought about it, honestly.
Or what happens if your project gets stuck in some massive queue? And how is the UK going to handle everyone switching to electric cars and heat pumps? They all need power, right? Plus, what about those old electricity pylons everyone's worried about? How do we modernize them while all this new stuff is coming online?
It's a lot to think about.
It is. It seems like getting all these new projects connected is the biggest challenge facing the UK's energy transition.
Yeah, it's a huge puzzle to solve. And there's a financial side to all of this that affects everyone.
For sure.
Honestly, it seems like the system is struggling to keep up.
Okay, well, let's try to break it down. First off, who are the main players in this whole electric power game?
All right, so we've got National Grid Electricity Transmission, or NGET.
Okay.
They own those massive high voltage lines, kind of like the electricity superhighways.
Makes sense.
Then you've got National Grid.
So many acronyms.
I know, right? They handle what they call the last mile of the delivery, getting power to homes and businesses. And of course, we can't forget the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, DESNZ.
Oh, yeah, the government folks.
They set the energy policy. They're the ones setting the goals and making sure everything works together, like a big city planner for the energy system.
Okay, got it. NGET builds the big lines, NGE brings it to our homes, and DESNZ makes sure it all runs smoothly.
You got it.
Actually getting connected to this grid, it sounds like a nightmare. It seems like NGED is the one really under pressure because they handle those final connections.
Yeah, and they're being measured on their performance too. Time to quote and time to connect are some of their key performance indicators.
So those KPIs mean they're trying to speed up the process.
Exactly.
Which is good news for anyone trying to connect. But then there's this connections action plan the government launched.
They realized that old first come, first served approach wasn't working.
Yeah, why wouldn't it work?
Well, it created a massive backlog of projects, and some weren't even realistic. So now they're trying to prioritize projects that are truly ready to go and that align with the UK's energy goals.
So if you're a developer with a fully funded, shovel-ready project in a good location, you might get bumped up the line.
Exactly. No more waiting behind 100 half-baked projects.
Smart move. Projects can actually change their applications a limitless number of times. Is that for real?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's true.
What? How is that even allowed?
It's a loophole that some developers are taking advantage of.
How so?
They keep tweaking their plans, pushing back their connection dates, which just clogs up the system for everyone else. The government is trying to figure out how to discourage these constant revisions. Maybe they'll limit the number of changes allowed or add penalties for excessive delays.
Yeah, they need to do something.
They want to make the system fair for everyone.
Makes sense. But all these upgrades and new connections, it's got to cost a fortune, right? We're talking a complete overhaul of the system.
Absolutely, and this is where things get interesting. Money is a huge factor in all of this.
It always is.
NGED needs to invest billions to upgrade the grid, but they can only earn a limited amount because of price controls set by Ofgem, the energy regulator.
Of Ofgem, that's the watchdog, right?
You got it. And they have to walk a fine line between keeping energy affordable for people and making sure NGED has enough money to invest in the future.
So it's a constant tug of war.
Pretty much. Ofgem wants to keep our bills down, but NGED is saying, hey, we need to upgrade all this stuff. It's old.
Right. It's like trying to run a modern city on a 100-year-old power system.
Exactly. And that brings us to those aging pylons you mentioned. Some of them are practically ancient. They weren't built to handle the demands of today's world, especially with all this new renewable energy coming in.
Okay, so we've got this aging infrastructure, a ton of new projects piling up, and a regulator trying to keep costs under control. How is any project actually getting finished in this environment?
That's the million-pound question, isn't it?
Literally.
And that's exactly what we'll dig into next. All right, so let's imagine you're a developer.
Okay.
And you've got this amazing new solar farm project. You're ready to pump clean energy into the grid. Where do you even start? First stop, connection application.
Okay.
For a big project like our imaginary solar farm, you'd go to NGET.
The superhighway people?
Exactly. But if it was a smaller project, you'd go to your local NGED.
Okay, so it depends on the size of the project. So you give them your plans, and then what? Do they just wave you through, or is there some big evaluation process?
They look at everything.
Like what?
The project size, location, how much power it will generate, what's the available capacity on the grid in that area.
Wow.
They even look at how your project might affect other projects already connected or waiting to get connected. It's a lot of juggling.
So is that where those infamous queues come in? My solar farm gets added to the list and I just have to wait my turn.
Well, remember, the government is trying to move away from that first come, first served model.
Right.
They're prioritizing projects that are ready to go and that really fit with those big national energy goals.
Makes sense.
So if you've got your funding, all your permits are sorted, and you've got a good location, you might jump ahead.
Okay, so it's not just about who applied first,
Right.
but even with these changes, it still sounds like a bureaucratic maze to me.
It can be, yeah.
Realistically, how long are we talking here?
Well, even with a smooth process, we're talking months, if not years.
Years.
Especially for large-scale projects that need serious upgrades to the grid.
Wow.
It's not just about plugging something in. It's about making sure the whole system can handle this new energy. It's a domino effect.
And all this waiting, it's got to be costing a fortune. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Time is money, and delays mean financial strain for developers. But it's not just that. Upgrading the grid itself, that's where the big money comes in.
I bet.
We're talking billions of pounds for new substations, transformers, transmission lines. It's a huge undertaking.
So who pays for all of this? Do developers just have to foot the bill for all these upgrades?
It's a shared burden. Developers contribute, of course, but a big chunk comes from us. The consumers, through our energy bills.
Ah, I see.
Ofgem, the regulator, allows NGT and NGED to recover these costs through the price controls they set.
It's that balancing act again.
Right.
Keeping energy bills affordable, but also making sure the grid gets what it needs.
Exactly.
But with this aging infrastructure and the demand for clean energy just keeps growing,
It does.
something has to give.
You're absolutely right. The current system is really strained.
How so?
We're trying to integrate these modern, decentralized, renewable energy sources
Right.
into a grid that was designed for large, centralized power plants.
Ah.
It wasn't built for this.
So what needs to change? How do we make this connection process smoother, faster, more cost-effective?
That's the big question. And it's a complex one. We need a more streamlined and transparent process.
Okay.
Smarter grid technologies that can handle all this renewable energy. And we need regulations that encourage innovation.
And invest.
Exactly. And most importantly, we need everyone to work together. The government, the regulators, the energy companies, us, the consumers, we all need to be on the same page.
It sounds like we need a complete system reboot.
Yeah.
But while we're figuring all that out, what's the reality for developers right now?
Yeah.
They're the ones trying to navigate this whole process.
So you've got your project, you've submitted your application, you've waited patiently, or maybe not so patiently, in the queue. Finally, you get that green light, but getting approval is really just the first step. Now comes the actual building and connection phase, and that's where things can get really complicated.
Oh, I bet. So walk me through it. What happens next?
Well, you're not just sticking solar panels in a field and plugging them in.
Right.
You're trying to integrate a whole new energy source into a massive, complex network.
Yeah.
There's a lot involved. Detailed engineering designs, working with landowners, getting all the permits, environmental assessments.
It's a whole other level of complexity.
Absolutely. It's a huge project.
I can imagine. And any delay in one area could push everything back.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just your project that's affected. Delays can ripple through the whole system.
Affecting other projects waiting to connect.
Exactly.
And all this is happening while the grid is still operating, right? So how do they manage that balancing act?
Well, that's where those smart grid technologies come in. Sophisticated data analytics, control systems to monitor energy flow, predict demand, respond to any fluctuation. But even with those smart technologies, there are limits to how much the existing grid can handle, especially with how old some of the infrastructure is.
So we can't just keep adding more and more projects.
We need to invest in modernizing those aging pylons, transformers, substations, all of it.
So are we talking about replacing all those old pylons?
Well, it's a mix of strategies. Sometimes it's replacing old equipment with newer, more robust technology. Other times it's about upgrading existing infrastructure or even burying power lines underground.
I bet those decisions are tough, costly, environmental impact, visual aesthetics.
A lot to consider. And this brings us back to Ofgem, the regulator. They're not just about keeping prices down, they're also responsible for making sure these upgrades happen.
Making sure the grid is reliable.
Exactly. And they have this tool called the price control mechanism.
Okay.
It basically sets a budget for NGT and NGED over a certain period, usually 5 years. This covers their costs, maintenance, and the investments in upgrades.
So it's like they're spending money.
Pretty much. But it's not just a free-for-all. Ofgem builds in incentives and penalties.
To encourage good performance.
Exactly. So if those companies can deliver the upgrades under budget and ahead of schedule, they get rewarded.
Makes sense. Reward good performance and incentivize innovation. But some people say these price controls are too lenient.
There are definitely different perspectives on that.
Some say companies are making too much profit.
It's all about finding that balance, right? Keeping energy affordable, but also making sure we have the investment we need. It's a tough challenge.
It feels like we're at this crucial point. We need to make the shift to cleaner energy, which means connecting all these new projects. But the grid is struggling to keep up. In the end, it's a shared responsibility.
Absolutely. The key takeaway is this: connecting new projects to the grid is a complex challenge, but it's absolutely crucial for a cleaner energy future.
And every decision we make, from installing solar panels on our roofs to supporting smarter energy policies, it all has an impact.
It does.
This transition to a cleaner grid, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It takes patience, collaboration, and a willingness to invest. Thanks for joining us on this electrifying journey.